So today we're working on a 2008 Jeep Liberty, and the customer complained that they were driving it the other day and the MIL began flashing and it lost power. So we've scanned it and retrieved a fault code in history for P0300, which is multiple cylinder misfire. Now there will be freeze frame data stored with this fault code, and we're going to have a look at the freeze frame data. I'm going to just pause this and we'll have a look at it. So I'm reviewing the freeze frame data here for this Jeep Liberty P0300 freeze frame, and I notice a couple of anomalies here. It had been running for roughly just under 5 minutes, 270 seconds right here, and the short-term fuel trim on bank 1 for whatever reason was pegged at 32% negative, yet bank 2 was only 3.8% negative. So there's a problem with fuel control on bank 1 for some reason, it looks like. Now the P0300 would technically be a random misfire, but is it really random? We're going to have a look at mode 6 data to see if it's confined to one specific cylinder, or maybe it's all on one bank. Let's have a look. So here's mode 6 data for cylinder misfire counters on number 1 cylinder. Over the last 10 drive cycles it shows 575 misfires. So let's check cylinder number 3. I've already done this, so I've got a recording of it. That shows 371 misfires. And cylinder number 5 shows less, but it also shows 58. The other 3 cylinders on the opposite bank show 0 misfires. If you look at the cylinder layout here, I've got a recording of that. That's all 3 cylinders on the driver's side, 1, 3, and 5. So we're going to look at some fuel trims while it's running, and hopefully we'll get lucky and capture this. So I got really lucky and managed to record fuel trim data while it started to miss. I had been looking at other data lists, and then it began misfiring, so I quickly loaded the fuel trim data list. Here's a digital version of the fuel trim data list. Now there are lots of data parameters, so I'm going to build a custom data list to minimize what I want to see. This is a recording. I'm playing it back, ShopStream Connect. Sorry for the video, poor video quality here. Okay, so there's just too many data parameters to try to view at one time in here. I want to focus on the oxygen sensor readings and the fuel trims. So I'm making a custom data list of this recording. So I'm going to deselect all, and then I'm going to pick feedback on both banks. Oxygen sensor 1, bank 1 sensor 1 as a 0 to 1 volt reading, as a 2.5 to 3.5 volt reading. Same with bank 2. The same with the post catalyst O2 sensors. And there's all of them there. So all 4 sensors displayed 2 ways each. And then we're going to look at short-term fuel trim on both banks and then graph this. So we can see here that bank 1 sensor 1 was reporting a rich condition, 3.3 volts to 3.5 volts over the entire recording, and it was at negative 32% fuel trim, and then it actually gave up. It went into open loop on bank 1 and it gave up, and there was no change in the O2 sensor reading. Here's the bank 2 sensor 1 doing its switching in a 0 to 1 volt range and a 2.5 to 3.5 volt range. Now this sensor down here, where is it? 2.1. Where's 2.1? Bank 1, 2 I should say. Bank 1, 2. It's flatlined at 0, which is basically lean as hell, and flatlined almost at 2.5 volts, which is lean as hell. So this sensor is saying it's lean, the sensor in front of the cat is saying it's rich, In my opinion, this sensor is misrepresenting the results of the combustion process. It's reporting a false rich condition, and the fuel trim is being adjusted to try to compensate for that, taking away over 30% of the fuel, and that's causing the misfires. Now, why it doesn't set fuel trim fault codes for bank 1, I have no clue, but for some reason it sets the misfire code. So this thing's going to get an oxygen sensor, and hopefully that's going to correct it. So let's have a look at where bank 1 sensor 1 O2 sensor is. There it is on the downpipe on the left hand side of the engine. It's a bit of a challenge to get to. You can't barely get your hands up there between the drive shaft and the transmission and the pipe. But the harder part is getting at the actual connector. The connector, let's see if I can get the light to focus in here. No, can't. Connector is way up on top of the bell housing, tied up to the harness up there. You can barely see it. There's part of it. There it is there. So I managed to get it unplugged with a long screwdriver and again reconnected with a long screwdriver and a hook to hold the other part down. But it certainly wasn't fun. I actually contemplated removing the front half of the drive shaft here, but I don't think that would have made much difference because there's really not a lot of room up there to get at that connector. So we got the new sensor, and we'll see if it fixes the issue. Okay, so here's a recording of the same vehicle now with bank 1 sensor 1 O2 sensor replaced. It's in a rather nasty place, difficult to get at the connector more than anything, but I managed to get it replaced, and you can see, you know, both as a 0 to 1 volt reading or a 2.5 to 3.5 volt reading. It's switching nicely now. The short-term fuel trim on bank 1 is, you know, toggling around 0, and the short-term fuel trim on bank 2 is doing the same thing. This is bank 2, this is bank 1, and long-term trims are near 0 as well. So that O2 sensor was reporting a false rich condition, and it was taking fuel away from bank 1 and causing it to misfire like crazy on all 3 cylinders on that bank. So we'll call this one fixed.